So now that we have this animation blueprint ready to go, we could theoretically drag this out there, and you get your skeletal mesh, and it's in the world, and it probably does some things. You could probably trigger it to animate by itself through some linkages and stuff like that, using calls and functions, etc. But that's not how I wanted to do it, and it seems to be a little more difficult if you want to have a whole bunch of these doors. So the way I'd like to do it is a little bit different. I'm going to go ahead and delete that, and I'm going to go back to my skeletal mesh here. I'm going to create yet another blueprint. I'm going to create a regular old actor blueprint. So I'm going to go and right click it, and I'm going to go down to, or up to Asset Actions, and create blueprint using this. And of course you've got your different places you can save it. Mine is in this place over here. I'm going to put it where everything else is. I'm going to call it BP door heavy, which is different than ABP, very similar, but just trying to keep them together. Call it that, and that's going to actually open up right away for me. And there's my object with the the pretty little gray texture that's not really useful. And on the screen, we have to do a couple of important things. The first thing I have to do is go over here to the right side. It says, where it says animation in these list of properties here, there's a use animation blueprint. We want to leave that alone, but we want to specify what animation blueprint we want to use. And this one, I'm going to go ahead and find my ABP door heavy whip, or VIP here, and that's going to basically tell this skeletal mesh, hey, we want to use ABP door heavy mesh as far as your animation goes. So whenever you want to animate, look at that for what you need to do. We don't need to set any other properties up with that. That should be good enough. Over here in the components, one thing I'd like to do is add a kind of a collision box so that I can tell where I can detect when the player gets close to the door. And of course, we'll use that collision information to later, in just a few minutes, inform our animation that it needs to fire using that player near value that I set up before. So I'm just going to call this one proximity, and it's good. I'm going to set this thing, the little orange box here, to more or less encompass the mesh. I don't know that this has to be super exact or anything. I make it usually pretty wide so I can get out to be super close to the door, make it tall enough so in case I'm jumping it works, and of course wide so that it kind of encompasses the door. So kind of rotate around. See, that's way too tall. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller and just kind of make it this way. I don't want it to loop into the floor, into the ceiling, in case I've got other floors nearby. I don't want to activate doors when I'm on different floors, etc. So that's set up like that. The proximity box is there, and at this point I think that's good enough for what we want to set up in the components. So I'm going to go over here now to my event graph and basically ignore all the normal events that are set up here. It's not scrolling there. And I'm going to go up here to my proximity object, and I'm going to create events based on that proximity object. And the way I do that is I go over here to the details, scroll all the way down, and then there's the event kind of shortcuts over here that lets you create some events. And I'm interested in the component begin overlap and end overlap, which are the collision notifications saying, hey, the player has entered the box or left the box. I'm going to click this one, and then my event type pops in. I'm going to leave that there. And then I'm going to go back to the mesh, or the proximity box, and I'm going to go and click the other one, the end overlap. So then that pops in as well. So I've got both of these events sitting here, and they're ready to go. The next thing I need to do is do something that's a little bit tricky if you're not used to it, and I'm certainly not used to it in blueprints. But it's the concept of casting, objects. So every skeletal mesh has basically animation kind of property, or an animator object kind of as part of its class. And in our case, if I go back to the viewport here, and I showed it to you just a minute ago, there it is. The animation properties here and the details here are what I'm talking about. So every skeletal mesh has one. It might not be actually set, so sometimes you might be interested in changing those, but in our case we just want it to be always set to what it was, and so I set that up earlier. But the blueprint system doesn't know by default what kind of animation you're going to use. So you can always get a animation object from your skeletal mesh. You can get the animation object that it has, kind of a abstraction of it. But what you need to do is then tell it what type of animation object that actually is, so you can access the individual properties of that animation object. So that's called casting. So the way we do that is we go over here and we get, first we want to get our animation object. So I'm going to get animation, not mode. Why am I don't have the animation object here. Get, there it is, get anim instance. I must have typed too much. So get anim instance. I've got that here. As when I pull that in, it automatically grabs the skeletal mesh, which is just fine. That's the one I'm going to want to use. I'm trying to get it to compress a little bit. So, so this basically tells it, okay, so given a skeletal mesh, give me the animation object that you're associated with. And that return value is a generic anim instance. It's not helpful for us because we don't know any, that particular anim instance doesn't have anything to do with actual animations, or maybe it does something generic that I don't know about, but for the most part it's not very useful for our purposes. So what we need to do is take that object that we have, and we need to take it, we need to cast to, and that's basically, it'll give us a list of different animation object, more specific animation types in our project. And I'm going to grab the one I made earlier, the ABP Door Heavy VIP animation blueprint that is both associated with our with the skeletal mesh as well as what I created earlier. And that's going to get me an actual animation structure that is set up with an actual animation and the animation graphs and all of those great details. It also has that great and very useful player near value. So what the plan is here is to take my animation instance object and simply change the value kind of inside that animation instance of that is player near, a boolean, to say, hey, animate this player is now near. Let's go ahead and start the animation. You know, kick the door from the early state to, sorry, the rest state to the you know, the opening state, and then once we leave, changing from the opening state to the closing state, and then finally back to the rest state. So at this point, we have now this specific animation class, this object that has within it a variable that is player near. So I need to go ahead and get that player near. So I'm going to player near. I'm going to type player near, and there's two different types. I could get the player near value if I wanted it for some specific reason, but I don't actually. All I want really is to set the player near. So I want to set it based on this event occurring. So then in this case, since I'm doing it as the player gets into the box, I want to set it. So I'm going to go and find my value here and hit the little checkbox, which is going to make it always turn on. So from here, I need to wire up this so it actually has a process. So I'm going to take my activation pin here. I'm going to stick it to the cast object. Otherwise, the cast never gets done. I'm going to take my cast. I'm going to put it on the set thing. And one thing I like to do is I always like to pull off a cast failed result here, because if I made a mistake, I like to be able to find out easily. So I will do this. I usually do print or debug print. Is what I usually do. So I want to draw a debug string. So I wanted to do. And that'll just bring up a little object which lets me set up some text, and I'm going to say whoops as the particular result, and make sure my duration is set to something so it's visible. So I'm going to set it to maybe 5 seconds, and I'm going to leave the text color and everything else fine. So in case this actually fails, I will be able to see on the screen that, hey, something failed, the cast failed, so I'm not actually going to see my result. So it's pretty helpful if things have been messed up, just to kind of get to the answer quicker. So what I want to do now, I've got that set up. Actually, this will do everything I needed it to do for when the player gets into the range of the door. I need to do something very similar for when the player leaves that proximity. So I'm going to select all my different pieces here, and I'm just going to hit Control W, which duplicates everything, and I'm going to bring it down here. And on my set, the one major difference is I'm going to turn off player near. Set it to false, basically is what that does. I'm also going to find this little line. I'm going to alt-click on that, get rid of this one because I don't need to duplicate that, just make it a little bit cleaner. And if the cast fails, I'm going to send it the same message. If I, for some reason, thought one would change differently, I would maybe have different messages, but it's not that big deal. So then I've got my cast to the animation type and my set of the value. So I'm going to drag my pin, my execution pin to my animation cast. And the one thing I've got left here, or one thing that's already set up, is the process from casting to the new set value. So then at this point, everything is all set up. I can kind of just make sure everything's correct, then go up here and compile and save once more, and we're all done with the blueprint. So at this point, I've got all my different pieces set to go here. I'm actually going to save all before anything blows up. I've got all kinds of stuff I've been playing with, so don't ignore what's on there. But everything in here is now saved. And now I've got my blueprint here, which I'm going to drag out in the world. And you can see that it's got the collision box already set up, and the devices are, sorry, the door is all pretty as it was before. And at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and play and test it out. So of course, my project is already set up with various movement controls and all that kind of stuff. You'll have to set that up yourself if you have your own, but it's pretty simple. So then I get close and the animation works. I stay here for a couple minutes, seconds, whatever it is. Animation just kind of waits for me to get done. I back up, and you can see everything works, and you can see, well, since I only made this one-sided mesh, you can see right through the back of it. But one thing, as I go, since my collision box goes around the back of it, it would pop up. So, to finish this off, I would probably complete the other side of the door, or duplicate the mesh and have it on both sides, so that way so it works on both sides. But for now, just the one side was fine. So I can go back and forth, and everything works great. And one of the nice things is, if I go ahead and escape and open my go back to my editor here, I can draw up another door and put it right next to it over here, and play again, and I can go, and that door works, and that door works, and they work separately. I can go back and forth, everything's fun. And then if I wanted to, I could rotate the door, even have some fun and collide them in the same place. So both doors open at the same time, play, oops, and both doors open and close. So just some fun things. The nice thing about this is that it actually works. It took me a kind of a frustratingly long time to figure out this very simple process, because of the various tutorials didn't really seem to be directed to exactly to what I wanted. I think they're all good tutorials, and they would all lead me in the right direction. But since I wanted to do something simple, I was getting overwhelmed with some of the extra details that were in the other tutorials. So hopefully this was a little bit helpful for you if you're trying to do something very similar. Obviously, if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them. It's not much going on here. It's just hopefully helpful to people out there. And of course, if you know of an easier way of doing this exact same thing, definitely let me know, because I spent some time trying to do a whole bunch of different things with different styles of animation, trying to play with a timeline system, the montage system, and just, as I said before, just wiring up a standard blueprint actor and trying to get it to play animations directly, and things just wouldn't work until I finally puzzled out some of the features I showed in this video. So with that, I think I'm going to go ahead and stop this. And again, thanks for listening. I hope it was helpful. Thank you.